Joe Biden and the Democrats want to prosecute Americans for going to church, but not for burning a church. They believe you can riot, vandalize, and destroy, but you cannot attend a peaceful pro-America rally. They want to punish your thought, but not their violent crimes.
The Trump rally over the weekend was on point when it comes to the messaging. That much is clear, and that's certainly encouraging. But there was a smaller crowd than was anticipated. And the media has made a very big thing of that. There's been a lot of discussion about it, and they're saying, oh, it shows the Trump movement doesn't have quite the same focus, doesn't have quite the same fury and support this time around. I don't see that as the case. I just think it's a reminder that we are up against an opposition here. The Democratic Party will do whatever it has to do. If they can scare people away by physically having psychotic Antifa-style protesters at every rally, if they can scare people away by saying that it's going to be a COVID super spreader. I mean, over the weekend, I tweeted out that I thought CNN was a BS super spreader when they started sharing that story. I think that's certainly true. I think that's a very defensible position. CNN is appalling, as are many of these other liberal networks. But the president understands what the issues are right now. It just doesn't feel like enough is being done. It doesn't feel like the actions are being taken that are necessary for protecting the system as it is, right? And I mean the system that keeps us all safe and keeps society functioning every day. Democrats are tearing this down. Their vanguard, their radicals, are doing whatever they can to undermine core aspects of our society. And the Democratic Party gets to stand behind all this and be like, whoa, that's kind of interesting. But to just bend the knee a little bit more. Just vote Democrat and everything will be better. Producer Brandon, if you would, please play the Trump-Biden clip.
Joe Biden is not the leader of his party. Joe Biden is a helpless puppet of the radical left. And he's not radical left. I don't think he knows what he is anymore. But he was never radical left. But he's controlled by the radical left. And now he's really controlled.
He is controlled by the radical left. The president's right here in saying this. He has no choice. Joe Biden is a machine Democrat politician. He's very old and very white. And that's not going to be good enough for the woke left. That's not going to be acceptable at all. So what does Biden have to do? Whatever the heck they tell him to do. And that's what we are likely to see. But just understand right now that there will be no rules. There'll be no quarter. There'll be no good faith. There'll be no sense of fair play from the left going forward. Just understand that right now. Whoever they have to destroy, whoever they have to cancel, whatever previously held positions the Democrat Party will have to abandon. All of that will be done in this effort to defeat Trump, because right now the radical left is ascendant. And if they can get Joe Biden to be the president, then they know that they'll be in a position to use this current momentum to the benefit of the Democrat Party and really the socialist Democrat left. We're not hearing enough about that. There are all these Marxist agitators and organizers running around. That's clear. That's obvious. They'll even say it on video. I mean, this is Captain Obvious stuff. Yeah, these are Marxist leftist agitators, but they are using this moment in time as well to push socialist policies, and we should not be surprised as that continues, and they add to this over time. They push even further. So I want us to be very clear about what the stakes are in all of this and what they're willing to do. You know, you had this moment of hashtag resistance from the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York, which is a very storied prosecutorial office here in New York City. And this guy decided, the current U.S. Attorney decided that he wasn't going to leave his position because he was an interim appointment. And he said that he wouldn't leave. He would not leave until there was a Senate confirmed replacement for him. And I just got to tell you, this stuff did not happen. I mean, to my point about how they'll undermine the day-to-day workings of the system. This did not happen under Obama. You never had somebody who was a Republican, long-term public servant and say, oh, I'm sorry, you're just not able, you, the Attorney General, and with that, really the president, you're not able to fire me right now. No, it turns out that he was able to be fired, that he was fired the moment that he released this press conference because Attorney General Barr decided that he wasn't going to sit around and allow this nonsense. Jeffrey Berman is the U.S. attorney in question here. And, you have to wonder, how much more of this do we have to see before we understand that at the very top of the legal profession, and I mean this for legal public servants, but also at the law firms now, the left has infiltrated them now, too. This idea of George Soros and his foundation and the money that he spreads around on the left to get radical policies enacted, that they're doing this by pushing for incredibly far left district attorneys in places like Philadelphia, but also in other places and throughout the federal government. I mean, the legal profession has been infiltrated by far left activists at the very highest level. And this is where you get much of what we saw with the deep state at the DOJ. They view Trump as a threat to what they believe in. And so they'll take actions that would be unthinkable, even under really a kind of a normal, whatever that means, a normal previous to Trump Republican administration. But you're also seeing now that they're just going to refuse. They're going to refuse to allow the system to function as it's supposed to. Sally Yates, who is a clear never-Trumper, involved in the targeting of General Flynn, the ridiculous usage of the Logan Act as a pretext for that interview. She was in on all that stuff, and she refused to do her job when it came to the so-called Muslim ban, which the Supreme Court did end up saying was constitutional. She refused to do her job and had to be fired. Now, Jeffrey Berman, who wasn't going to be fired from his job at first, at least, Bill Barr let out a scathing, very strong and scathing letter about this whole fiasco. But what Jeffrey Berman did, because it's career enhancing for him and it makes him a hero on the left, is pretend that he is that he's being removed from his job because of ongoing investigations of Trump and Trump associates. That's all you have to do. Then you get on MSNBC. Then you become a hero to the left. Everyone will think of you as someone who has done his part for the hashtag resistance. And we keep seeing this happen. And it's just, you're going to have more of this. Don't think that just because the Russia collusion farce and the Ukraine impeachment fiasco did not work, that the left is giving up any of this stuff, that they're changing their mind about any of this. Don't think that that's happening. It's not. We're just waiting to see who else will come forward. What other, Lieutenant Colonel Vindmans are somewhere in the flabby folds of the federal bureaucracy. Who else is going to come forward and decide that they have something? Oh, you mean someone, for example, like Bolton? Oh, yes, indeed. Speaking of the legal system and all these bombshell revelations from this Bolton book, I've got to tell you, Bolton is done. He's done. No intelligent human being will ever give him a job in government again after this. So I guess it's a good thing that he got $2 million. And I would note, people were very nice to him, always putting him on TV over at Fox for many years. And he was treated with real reverence. Based on what? I mean, this guy's idea was more troops, more war, more fighting all the time. Wars that he was never going to fight in, never has fought in. He's the quintessential not even armchair general, armchair military strategist. Yeah, that's right. Send more of your troops in there. Stay there forever. Fight in Afghanistan forever. And President Trump, I think, had finally had enough of this and got rid of him. Now, Bolton is in some trouble here, I think. His book is effectively already published, so the demands from the White House to pull back its publication are not going to be successful because the book's already out there. I know people with copies of it. I mean, you can't stop this. The horses left the barn, right? It's all over with that. But it does seem, and a judge has said, Okay, fine. He's published his book, but there very well may be classified in there. And I've got to say this. I'm not somebody that believes in being unfair about this, unduly harsh. And I know that the pre-publication review process for people who have had security clearances and have national security responsibilities, I know that it can feel absurd. And it is absurd at some points, at some times. There's stuff that gets blacked out of these books. You know, they take the black marker and they erase things. That is, you could find it with 2 seconds in Google search engine, and it's just nuts. But if you're the national security advisor and you're writing a book while the president you served is still in office, sorry, you got to go through the whole process just like everybody else. The federal government should seize all of what Bolton has received for this book. Assuming that he didn't go through the full pre-publication process, which I think at this point has been established. So they should take the $2 million advance. They got to make an example of, if you're not going to make an example of the most recent national security advisor writing a tell-all book, why should someone who served in special operations who wants to write a memoir of combat, or why should somebody who was a DIA analyst who wants to write about their time writing memos and making coffee, because I know what that's like. That's what I was doing. Why should they have to go through all this nonsense if the national security advisor, at the very height of the national security apparatus, does not have to? Sorry. Rules are rules, folks. You know, the libs are pretending it's not the case, but we're not giving up on this. Rules are rules. And if Bolton published classified, he's got to face criminal prosecution for that. You can't do that just because you hate Trump. Hating Trump is not an excuse to erase the rules on classification. So, here's, for example, the left would normally hate this guy, but right now he's useful to them. Right now, Bolton is their buddy because he says things like this.
I'm assuming you have not seen Donald Trump since you resigned.
Have not spoken with him.
Do you think you'll ever speak to him again?
I doubt it. I don't think he's a conservative Republican. I'm not going to vote for him in November. Certainly not going to vote for Joe Biden either. I'm going to figure out a conservative Republican to write in.
How do you think history will remember Donald Trump?
I hope it will remember him as a one-term president who didn't plunge the country irretrievably into a downward spiral we can't recall from. We can get over one term. 2 terms I'm more troubled about. Decisions are made in a very scattershot fashion, especially in the potentially mortal field of national security policy. This is a danger for the republic.
I mean, he's definitely disloyal. And I think you can make a case that, he's not a traitor. Well, he might have violated the Espionage Act by publishing classified information that's damaging to U.S. national security interests. So that's bad. Other people get called very terrible things, and other people go to prison for that. Captain Mustache Bolton over here, he thinks that he's just going to get away with this. And I think he may be overestimating, because he's not a leftist, right? If a leftist wrote this book, if a Democrat somehow can, now he is saying he's going to vote for Biden, so maybe you can argue he's a Democrat now, but they hate Bolton on the left. They like him right now for obvious reasons. But this is a big change. This is a big switch from what we had been presented with as Bolton in the past. And I got to say that if you're the national security advisor to a president and you really think he's unfit for office and you're going to say all these terrible things about him, the lack of personal loyalty here and the lack of caring about the mission, and just from what I've seen, the excerpts of this book, I don't have a full copy of it yet, but the excerpts that I've seen published, Bolton is so petty and such a prima donna and should never be listened to by anybody ever again about anything. He should go away from the public sphere. He should be done. And I give credit to Tucker Carlson, who had a really contentious interview with Bolton years ago on TV, and Tucker looks like he was spot on with all that. And, Tucker is the single most interesting commentary on Fox News right now. For my money, no question about it. But I've also got to bring this up because we believe in being truthful and being fair here in the Freedom Hut always. Trump has really bad instincts about people. I don't know who convinced him to bring in Bolton, because he was an adult in the room or something. I don't know who thought this was a good idea. Bolton is opposed to Trump on policy, and Bolton was not to be trusted, period. And yet they brought him in at the very top level. And now he's writing a book trashing Pompeo and Tillerson and Haley and you name it. Trashing these people. No personal honor, no integrity, a slime ball. That's the former national security advisor. I mean, you got to look at who Trump has put into these places, from whether you're talking about the Mooch to Omarosa to Bolton to very bad choices about personnel. I think we should know who pushed for these personnel choices. Was it really Trump? I don't think so. I think we should know who in the White House was saying, yeah, Bolton's a good idea, because I got a couple of guesses. Now, this is just fascinating. An example of the kind of extreme, dishonest propaganda that you will be seeing as we get into the height of this deeply contentious election season. But this is what NPR, which is getting funding from the taxpayer, folks. This is what NPR has to say here about a phenomenon of riotous protesters, or just rioters. How about that, Buck? Use the proper term. Rioters who surround vehicles, which is an obvious threat and deeply terrifying to people that are stuck in the vehicle. Now the bad guys they want us to believe are the people that are ramming the protesters to get away. And I mean, let me just give you the NPR version of this story. This was amazing over the weekend. Right-wing extremists are turning cars into weapons, with reports of at least 50 vehicle ramming incidents since protests against police violence, just against police actually, violence erupted nationwide in late May. At least 18 are categorized as deliberate attacks. Another two dozen are unclear as to motivation, according to a count released by a terrorism researcher at the University of Chicago Project on Security and Threats, whatever the hell that is. These 20 people facing prosecution include a state leader of the KKK, as well as a California man who was charged with attempted murder. Video footage of some of the attacks show drivers threatening protesters. You need to get out of the streets and stop these protests, one of them said. Okay, look, are there some psychopaths who might try to mow down protesters with a car? Yes. But what do we make of the people who are gathering around vehicles, bashing them, smashing windows? Does the left believe that if you're just a person trying to drive your car and the maniacs on the streets from whatever the movement is called today, but it's always Democrats and the left, you're supposed to sit there and what? Let them smash your windshield, smash your driver's side window, pull you out of the car and beat you to death? If I were surrounded by an angry mob in a vehicle, guess what? I would hit the accelerator to escape, to save my life, and I would not think twice about it. Maybe NPR should stop with the crap. Unknown motivations? How about not getting beaten to death by a bunch of psychotic, whiny, crybaby left-wing protesters? How about that as a motivation for the unknown motivation events?
Well, I do believe there were two standards of justice during a period of time toward the end of the Obama administration. And all I can do about it is apply one standard of justice, the right standard of justice, and make sure we apply it to everybody equally. And that's what I'm trying to do.
If we have two standards of justice, which we clearly do in this country for people based upon their politics, then we don't really have a justice system worthy of the name, do we? So we need dramatic accountability and reform in all of this. And the first step in that is going to be transparency, going to be honesty, truth, what really happened here. Now, I know that Attorney General Barr, who is the single most effective cabinet member in this administration, Attorney General Barr is willing to let the Durham probe out of Connecticut play out, which is a good thing. We want to see what that prosecutor, John Durham, we want to see what he comes up with. He was U.S. attorney in Connecticut, and he's looking at everything that happened in the Russia collusion case, and we're going to find out very soon, I hope, that the whole thing was really a sham. We already know it was a sham, but I mean, we're going to have the proof. We're going to be able to point to the documents, the interviews, the intercepts, whatever it may be, to show that this whole thing was cooked up to undo the results of a presidential election. The Democrats have faced no accountability for this whatsoever. And the people in the federal bureaucracy, whether it's a Comey or a McCabe or a Strzok or a Page, have faced minimal accountability for what is already proven to be misdeeds on their part based entirely in politics. That President Trump had as effective a first 3 years in office as he did, while there was a rolling soft coup attempt against him, is really remarkable. And I'm glad to see that at least now he has an attorney general in place who understands this fight, understands the forces arrayed against him, and will do what is necessary to get something at least approaching justice. Because I'm telling you, they are cooking up. The left is cooking up an October surprise right now. I don't know what it is, but they are working, behind the scenes. People hate Trump so much that they will break their oath to the country. They will put themselves in legal and criminal jeopardy. They'll leak. They'll break agreements. They'll break protocol. They'll do whatever they have to do to take this guy down. And that's why I'm at least pleased that the Attorney General is up for this fight. He knows this enemy. He knows who these people are. And he understands what they're willing to do. There's also the latest on the Chaz, which the Attorney General weighed in on. I'll get to his comments on this in a second, but I just first want to say that the Chaz in Seattle, or I think they were calling it the CHOP, right? The Capitol Hill Occupy protest. But now I'm seeing the media still calling it the Chaz. Maybe they've decided that branding this as part of the Occupy movement is a step back for them, that as a PR issue, this is not what they want to do. But I must say the situation in Seattle continues on. There was this video that went viral over the weekend of a few EMS people for the city of Seattle who were being told that there was a gunshot wound inside the Chaz in the Seattle occupied zone, autonomous zone. No police allowed in, but they want EMS to come in. And the EMS kept calling into dispatch, and they were saying, "Do we have permission to go in?" And you had this, I think it might have even been this guy Raz, who is viewed as a leader of this autonomous zone, screaming at the people in the EMS vehicle, saying, "Why won't you go in and save?" And then, of course, it turned into, "Oh, this is racist. It's because the person who shot is black. You're not going in." No, that's just not true. The reason they're not going in is because you guys declared it an autonomous zone. And police aren't allowed in. And there's a threat of violence if police try to go in. Well, if police aren't allowed in, guess what? EMS don't want to go in because they have no protection. They have no sense that they're not going to come under assault if they go in there. Who knows? See, the left hates rules that are enforced truly and in good faith. The left hate, whether it's just laws or rules or agreements, the left opposes contracts. They replace contractual agreement. They replace law with emotion. What do I feel? What do I want? This is the elevation of childishness above civilization. And this keeps playing out in different places all across the country. One of them is this Seattle protest movement. Attorney General said that he does not believe that this is going to be able to just keep going on as is. Brandon, play clip 6, please.
They took over an area in Seattle, and they're guarding it with guns. Mm-hmm. They tried to do it in Portland as well. Does the federal government have a responsibility to protect citizens of our country if the cities and states won't do it? Because people's property have been damaged. There are people who don't want this autonomous area in Seattle around their homes.
Right. Well, in the first instance, it's the responsibility, obviously, of the local officials and then the state officials to protect the rights of their citizens. At the end of the day, the federal government does have a responsibility to make sure that citizens are not deprived of their federal rights.
So will you challenge that autonomous city? Will you sue the mayor? What can you do?
Well, I don't want to get into specifics, but we're obviously keeping an eye on it. And as the president said, in due course, we may have to do something about it, but we can't let it go on indefinitely.
Keep in mind that the Democrats are all about federal intervention whenever they want it. But then when they don't want it, the federal government's not allowed to do anything. You know, they want the federal government, say, to pass laws to override what states have decided on the Second Amendment. They want the Supreme Court, and therefore the federal government, to weigh in, and has weighed in, on abortion, as we know, and make that the law in all 50 states, or on gay marriage and make that the law in all 50 states. When it's something that they want, federal action, there's always a justification for federal action and the dictate of D.C. But here, when it comes to the fundamental safety and security of a part of the country that is still under federal jurisdiction, everything in the United States technically falls under a degree of federal jurisdiction because it's America, right? The Seattle Autonomous Zone, yes, it's in the city of Seattle, in the state of Washington, but it is still technically America, which means that there has to be some understanding that the people there, you know, if we had Americans in harm's way in Bulgaria or Somalia or Bolivia, the U.S. government would be willing to, or would be in a position to take action, right? And then that would be a federal matter because it's outside U.S. territory. But if people are truly in duress and in danger in a major U.S. city, and they've been abandoned by the state, what happens then? The Attorney General is not going to show his cards here on what the specific legal justification for a federal action there would be. But I believe if this guy's saying this can't go on indefinitely and they're going to do something, he means it. Now, Trump has been saying a lot about this, and I think part of the frustration that we see is that the president of the United States is saying the right things about these protest movements, is saying the right things about law and order and restoring police as into their rightful place as the guarantors of our public safety, right? Especially in places like New York, Seattle, elsewhere where you can't own a gun, so you can't guarantee your own safety. The Attorney General saying he might do something here. I think he just might. And he also was asked. This was all a Maria Bartiromo show on Fox Business. He also was asked about the Bolton book, which I thought was interesting. Play clip 8, Brandon.
I don't think it's too late because what we're asking is for him to complete the process before the book is published, complete the process of taking out classified material. And in our view, there remains very highly classified material in the book still. And we would like him to address that. And so under the law, we are bringing a civil action to enforce his agreement that he would do that before publishing. The remedy, if he doesn't complete it, is that he forfeits any money from that book to the government.
That's what has to happen. There's no leeway on this. There's no two sides to this argument. He either completes the government process here, or the government can see, because it's a contract. This isn't just about your First Amendment rights. This is also about you signed a binding legal agreement with the federal government. You're violating that, so they're going to take your money. They took, I think it was $7 million in proceeds from the book written by that guy, No Easy Day, where one of the Navy SEALs on the bin Laden mission wrote a book about it and didn't go through the Pentagon clearance process. And guess what? He sold a ton of copies of that book. He made millions of dollars, and they seized every penny. How can you seize every penny that a Navy SEAL who was risking his life and was on that mission made by violating this process and not seize every penny from Mustache Bolton? Doesn't make any sense, right? You can't have that. Can't be in that circumstance, in that situation. We don't like double standards on the right. We conservatives object to double standards. Well, there's a clear one here if this is allowed. And I got to tell you, everyone that I know who was supportive of Bolton to get this job in the first place should really be eating some humble pie. I mean, there should be accountability for the stupidity in pushing this. But I don't think that's going to happen. I do hope there's accountability for Bolton breaking his contract. And now Barr says he hasn't done it yet because they haven't. But the copies of it are already out. So I don't understand what they think will be accomplished here other than trying to seem like they're being reasonable. But the book that's already out, because there are galley copies. I have friends who have copies of this book already. Anything that's taken out of the next version of the book, everybody would know what the highly classified stuff is, which is effectively the government admitting what is highly classified that's already been published. That doesn't solve the problem at all. But they're going to have to take Mustache Bolton's winnings here, or else nobody should have to submit their book for pre-publication. Nobody should have to do that. That's what's at stake here. Last week, we talked about a few cases of people believing that a hate crime had occurred because of a noose that was found somewhere. This happened in Oakland, and this happened here in New York City in Harlem at what is called Marcus Garvey Park. And it turned out in both instances, there was no hate crime at all. It was just a rope at a tree, not meant for a noose, not meant to be a weapon of terror. It was just a rope at a tree, in one case to haul up equipment, and in another case to allow somebody to engage in exercise. And in that instance, the man engaging in the exercises was himself black and said this was not a noose. It has nothing to do with that. It's just ropes, 5 ropes hanging from a tree. And the city of Oakland continued with its investigation and made it clear to everybody that even if you have no intent when you have a rope near a tree or on a tree, even if you have no intent to terrify anybody, if someone can come along and say, oh gosh, that reminds me of a noose, even if it's not a noose, it could be a hate crime. Intent does not matter. That was the statement of the mayor of Oakland, which was just a shockingly absurd, but also important for us to know that's what they believe. Even if you don't intend for an inanimate object to be a weapon of terror, it will still be investigated as a hate crime if people who are easily frightened and who are acting in a kind of hysteria think that it could be a weapon of terror. So, okay, now let's get to the latest instance of a noose being found, and it is in the garage stall of NASCAR driver Bubba Wallace, who, as I understand it, and I do not know NASCAR well, so apologies if I miss any of the backstory to all of this, because I don't know much about Mr. Bubba Wallace. But they found this new. He's the most prominent African American NASCAR driver in the country, and they say that they found a noose in his garage stall. I have a few questions here. Sometimes when these incidents happen, I will just say, no way, because of X, Y, or Z, because of the information we already have. I'm not there with this. There are a few possibilities. One, somebody would be heinous and stupid and evil enough to do this, although if that's the case, there are, because of social distancing now with NASCAR and everything, there are very few people that have access to this area. There are a lot of cameras around, and it would not be hard to find out who it is. I'm not saying it's impossible. I find it, though, not probable that that is what happened. Another possibility, that this was someone who wanted to be raising awareness, so using the noose as a racist symbol, but putting it there specifically so that then we could all talk about racism, even though the person putting it there themselves, they would say, well, I'm not racist, if and when they are caught. This has happened many times. There have been hundreds of hoax hate crimes where this was the rationalization of the person who did the who placed the noose or whatever it was in a certain place in order to engage in a hate crime. One part of this, and I'm checking as I'm on air with you to make sure I haven't missed this, I have yet to see a photo. This was at the Talladega Speedway in Alabama. I have yet to see a photo of the noose, which I find very surprising. Now, the FBI is investigating. The FBI is investigating this as a hate crime, and I have a feeling we're going to find out a lot more in the days ahead. I don't have a clear look, if someone did do this, that's a grotesque and terrible thing, and we all know that doesn't even really, it doesn't have to be said on the show because you already know that's how I feel. But I'm wondering how this could happen given the very tight access into a garage stall for a NASCAR driver like this. And I'm also wondering why we haven't seen a photo of the noose. Wouldn't that be all over the place? Wouldn't we see this? I have not yet. And I would just note that we've had a number of noose hoaxes in the last week. So I'm not clear yet on what this is going to turn into. I'm going to watch this closely. I have a feeling we're going to find out some very interesting details in the days ahead. And we're going to find out if this is real or not. I think that's true. Keep an eye on it, though, and keep an eye on how the media puts this forward. If it happened, it's terrible, and people should be punished. But let's find out who it is, and let's find out what their motivations were.